Hello, everyone, and welcome again to another Teacher Joseph podcast. Today's phrase is to be gutted, and this is an idiomatic expression used in British English to describe a feeling of deep disappointment or of profound sadness. Now, it's incredibly metaphorical. And although it's used to talk about deep feelings, we often use it in a superficial way. For example, the restaurant has removed my favorite dish. I'm gutted, absolutely gutted. It can be used to talk about personal achievements. I was gutted when I found out that I came in second place and that I didn't win the race, for example. The fans were gutted when their team lost. She was gutted to have missed the concert. He was gutted when he found out that his best friend was moving to another country. After studying so hard for the exams, I was gutted to see that I hadn't scored. We were all gutted when the holiday we'd planned for so long had to be cancelled. So these are all examples of being gutted. And you can use that in different tenses. I would certainly be gutted if I couldn't give you this podcast every day. Other examples might be they were gutted when they found out something had happened. They would be gutted, they will be gutted. The present perfect is maybe a little bit more tricky because I think it doesn't easily fit into a present perfect scenario. They had been gutted. I can't think of any examples for that, so it's better to stick with the past tense, present, and future. Now, I was really gutted yesterday to get some news which was deeply disturbing. Yesterday, I found out, that means I became aware, or news was passed to me, that the British Telecom Tower in London is going to become a hotel. Now, for those of you who have travelled to London and you know London well, the British Telecom Tower, the BT Tower, is a large tube-like structure which sits in the middle of London. It looks metallic and it has a little thing on the top which rotates, a little electronic sign. It's very beautiful and it's been a London landmark since the 1960s. Before the days of the telephone, the post office was the central hub for communications. And as the government gradually introduced telephones, the post office had the responsibility for communication. So this tower, which was built in 1965, was called the Post Office Tower. It is indeed very beautiful, and in the 1960s, it almost looked space age, because it was the most modern thing in London, and it was also the tallest structure in London before the NatWest Tower came along, which I think now is HSBC Tower, and that's no longer the tallest structure either. But in 1965, this tower dominated the London landscape, and it still entertains tourists. When the government separated the post office and the telephone company into two separate companies, This tower became the British Telecom Tower because British Telecom was the government company that looked after telephones before it was privatized. This tower is indeed very beautiful, and in its heyday, that means in its magical moment when it was most famous, it had a lot of satellite dishes attached to it because it was responsible for international communications. Of course, as time went by, less and less of it was actually used. I have a cousin, and he always says that his parents met because of that tower. His father worked in that tower, and his mother was making an international call to Italy, and they got chatting on the telephone. Now, I'm not sure if that's just one of these family stories or if it's actually true, but I like to think that it's true. One interesting fact about the British Telecom Tower is that when the government introduced all these health and safety regulations, that buildings must have emergency stairs and places to escape in the middle of a fire, this building was exempt. Because of its shape, there is no way everyone could get out using the stairs within it. So it has an elevator built in, and it was the only building in London which was allowed to have regulations where people could escape by elevator instead of stairs. A very interesting building indeed. And if you don't know it, it looks a little bit like that big tower which is on the mountain above Barcelona. But of course, the BT Telecom Tower is much, much smaller. One of the interesting moments that it had during the time that it was used as the British Telecom Tower was in 2016 when everything went pear-shaped. That means that everything went wrong. They had some kind of failure inside the tower, and so the rotating message on the top showed Windows error. Well, we've all had those, haven't we? Windows errors. Another interesting thing about this tower is it used to be open to the public, and you could go inside it, and it had a lovely rotating restaurant on the top. It didn't rotate very fast, but it did rotate, and you could sit in there and enjoy a lovely dinner while looking out across London. Again, I'm going to compare it to Barcelona because if you know the big shop Corte Inglés, which is in Plaza Catalonia, it has a lovely cafe restaurant on the very top, and you can look out across Barcelona. It's something, or it was something very similar. But in the 1970s, a bomb exploded inside it. And because a bomb exploded inside it, it was closed forever to the public. When a fire rips through a building, we also use the verb to gut. A fire gutted the building. Now, that's very, very different, of course, from saying that, oh, I'm gutted or they are gutted. But it shows the sense of power and also the lack of control which we have when we feel gutted. The last time I went on holiday to the Netherlands, I stayed in a big hotel that looked something like the post office tower, the British Telecom tower, but it was custom built and was designed to be a hotel. I would imagine inside the British Telecom tower, the rooms would have to be very small unless they make it one of these very posh hotels only for rich executives with a room on each floor. But it's probably bigger than it looks, I think. And I'm guessing the top part of it now, which still rotates, could still be used as a restaurant. But I wouldn't like to be stuck inside it if there was a power failure, if I couldn't get out. On one hand, I really do feel gutted that they are changing one of my favorite buildings. I suppose, though, the writing's been on the wall for many years. If we say the writing's on the wall, it means that it was likely to happen. There was almost a prophecy that it was going to happen. It just means that we kind of knew in our minds somewhere that it wasn't going to survive. Especially in 2011, they took down the satellite dishes. So when they did that from outside of it, it was kind of clear that the building wasn't going to have much of a future. The British Telecom Tower, on one hand, in my mind, I'm gutted that it's changing, but on the other hand, I'm really happy that they're not tearing it down, because in these days of political correctness and everything having to look perfect, buildings from the 60s don't usually survive. So that's something for you to check out today. And if you've been to London, I'm sure you would have seen the British Telecom Tower. It looks like a kind of space-age building that protrudes into the sky. You couldn't mistake it for an office block, but you might have thought that perhaps it's something else. It's not really a tourist attraction. I mean, if you go to the bottom of it, it sits on top of a little 1960s looking office block. So it's not all the way into the ground as a tower. It sits on a little elevated cube which has its own entrance. But it's been used for many movies and TV shows. And I have to say, I'm kind of gutted, but I'm also kind of curious and excited that at least it has a future. For teenage boys, to see this tower with all of its satellite dishes, and you can just imagine inside it there would be lots of buttons to press. It was one of the most exciting buildings before technology changed and the internet came. It was one of those buildings that you would really want a picture of to hang in your bedroom, or to have a big poster of it in your bedroom. So you can go and Google that today, the British Telecom Tower. I hope you found this helpful. Let's talk again soon. See you. Bye.